Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alistair Gunn. I'm the Director of the Glasgow City Innovation District. Welcome to the final panel session of Digit West today. It's great seeing everybody here in the afternoon. This session is all focused on fintech innovation, and for many of you who have been in amongst the financial services sector, I think fintech has definitely been one of the sectors which has been accelerating very, very quickly. And one of the things I think we're going to be focusing in on this session is looking at AI and ML and its impact to that. Again, for anybody who's been looking at some of the various kind of projects and innovation projects that are happening in around Glasgow, you may have heard of the Financial Regulation Innovation Lab that's been run currently by FINTECH Scotland. If you haven't heard about that, no, please do go out and look at the Financial Regulation Innovation Lab. There's a lot of calls coming up that are linked into AI, into the regulation space. So we've got two great speakers here today. We've got Nick Cousins, CEO of Exizent, and we've got Marika Causa, Director of Fraud and Payments from Cleo. As I say, it's great to have Nick here. For many of you, Exizent has been one of the companies that have been in among Scotland's tech sector for many years, and as I say, has worked closely alongside Alex Tomczyk, I think it's maybe, with regards to kind of creating that kind of business. And it's also great to have Marika here from Cleo. Again, you may have be aware of that business when it comes to the application that they've actually created. At the heart of all this is data, AI, machine learning, and also just again thinking about the impact of utilising that technology within financial services when it's quite a regulated industry. So without further ado, I'd like to invite first speaker, Nick Cousins, to the podium, please. Please put your hand together.
Afternoon, everyone. Everyone hear me okay? Excellent. So listen, thanks for coming along. I know we're competing against quantum computing over there and Nicki Minaj outside as well. So thanks for bearing with us into the afternoon sessions. I'm going to skip past that picture because I don't know who that guy is, but move on to this. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about AI. I'm not an AI expert. I'm going to say that right from the outset. I run a technology company, non-AI native technology company, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on. But what I thought would be interesting to do is share some of the machinations that we're going through at the moment as a tech business, thinking about how we might apply AI into our future, right? What that might mean and some of the things we're going through. And maybe that will resonate with some of you as well as you're thinking about your own businesses or things you're trying to proceed with. But I wanted to start first with a little bit of a step back in time, a bit of a history lesson. So when I started work, it was 1997, which is a terrifyingly long time ago now. And it was right at the start of the dot-com boom, right? And I thought it'd be useful thinking about the dot-com boom and the bubble that it created as a bit of context for today and AI. So what happened with the dot-com boom, right? So three key things happened. Firstly, consumers got very, very excited about this brave new world of online services and all this exciting stuff that would change the face of commerce, change the way that the world operated. We all had to learn new languages. We started turning them into ISPs and modems and all that exciting stuff. We were encouraged to ask Jeeves. If any of you remember Ask Jeeves, right? You could ask Jeeves anything and Jeeves would tell you the answer. We'll come back to the parallels of that in a second. And it was all quite exciting. So that was number one. Number two, investors piled an absolute boatload of money into a load of companies that nobody had ever heard of, had no idea whether they'd be successful, but they really went mad, right? A lot of cash was invested into startups and existing businesses to make them digitally ready, right? And they hyped things and there's massive valuations and all that kind of exciting stuff. So that was the second thing. And then entrepreneurs and business owners, what did we all do? Well, we ran about creating lots of interesting new businesses. existing businesses try to rethink their entire business models to work out how they would be e-commerce businesses and the like. Web development resource became the hot ticket in town. So if you're a web developer, you could pretty much write your own check and someone would hire you to build online businesses. And we created some absolute business celebrities, young, energetic startups who came out. I'm sure you could name quite a few, who we put up on a pedestal as these, bastions of the new world order. And that was great. And lots of fun happened. It's very exciting for the entirety of 3 years. And in the year 2000, we all looked behind the curtain of dot-com world and sort of went, oh, not all is as rosy as it might seem in the land of this brave new world of dot-com. Consumers, well, what happened? There was a bit of an expectation gap problem, really. What we expected to see, what we were promised, didn't really come true. We were let down by bad design. We were let down by really crappy bandwidth, frankly. Half the stuff that came online you couldn't access because we're all using dial-up modems. Investors got cold feet. They ran away really fast, lost a lot of money, pulled funding, and a lot of investors really had burnt fingers and ran away from the whole market. And then businesses, well, what did businesses do? Well, some businesses disappeared almost overnight. They were there one day, they weren't there the next day. They retrenched into existing business models. And a lot of those celebrity business people that we knew at the time were then pilloried for being idiots, because why couldn't they see this all coming? And we saw a lot of that. So there was a lot of volatility in that market, and there's some interesting parallels with what's happening today. And in the world of AI, is it the same thing? Are we living inside an AI bubble? I think from my perspective, you have to think about AI as a really broad subject. We're very excited about Gen AI, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a second. But really, if you think about some of the more established technologies that have been around for a long time, narrow AI like Siri and all the things that we use on our phones, machine learning, which I know Marika will probably talk a little bit more about, but other things that are more established. There's no doubt you can't apply a single kind of it's all going to burst overnight across the whole thing. But there are some parallels, right? There's some interesting things happening. So from a consumer perspective, we're all very excited, and lots of people are running to ask ChatGPT anything, right? We're all learning a new set of language around AI and what it means for us in the future. So consumer excitement around AI in the last 18 months with ChatGPT and others now following has definitely increased. Investors putting a lot of money into this sphere, actually probably unparalleled amount of money being spent by investors in the broad AI space. Valuations probably not ramping quite as much because people have learned the lessons from the past, but definitely still a real hot spot for investment. And then businesses, it's exactly the same. Lots of businesses running around trying to create new models, generate revenue from new businesses, existing businesses working out how to apply AI into their existing models and how they're going to change the businesses. If you are an AI developer, you can pretty much write your own ticket and go and get money from a whole host of people who are willing to pay you to come and bring that expertise in-house. And I'm sure there are a range of celebrity business people that we're now putting on a pedestal in this space. So the parallels are quite clear. It'd be easy to say there is a bubble building, and there's certainly a lot of hype around AI, which, if you think about it, that's probably one of the key risks with AI is the amount of hype. And there's a great writer, Gemma Milne, who I think is here actually today. She writes really well about the consequences of hype, and there are a load of things that can happen through hype, but there are 4 really interesting things I think about a lot. One is hype can lead to inaction, so it's just almost so exciting you can't do anything at all, which is definitely one issue. It can lead to distraction. So you had a mission, it was over here, hype pulls you away from that mission, and you're now focused on something else that perhaps isn't quite so core. It can lead to expectation mismanagement. So I'm promising all of this stuff over here, but in reality, when you get into the gritty detail of all, it doesn't quite meet up to expectations, and that can be a problem. And the last thing, probably the most dangerous thing, is hasty decision-making. So Gemma talks a lot about that, about the rational decision-making sort of gets thrown out the window as you pursue this new thing that's been hyped over here. So there's no doubt there's a lot of hype, and it could be easy to say, well, is AI going to go the same way that .com did for the rest of us? And I think there are some things that make AI slightly different. So this is a really helpful model that McKinsey published last year talking about the AI value chain. And actually, if you think about this, from the bottom, computer hardware, these are the chips that support all of the kind of AI world, right? Cloud platforms, AWS, all the other things that provide the power to run all those chips on. The big foundation models being ChatGPT, all the large language models that exist that are starting to become more prevalent. And then model hubs, this is your access point into those models if you're trying to use them. You think about that part of the value chain, there's a lot of very big businesses in there, supremely well funded, or actually are all quite mature from other business lines that they've done. So NVIDIA, for example, AWS, Microsoft with ChatGPT and OpenAI, Hugging Face, which is my favorite name of a company of all time, I think, as a hub layer. And for most of it, it's really this green box where we're operating, right? So for companies like myself and others, you're building applications to try and use and leverage all the power that's underneath here. So this all feels pretty stable. It's not going to disappear tomorrow, but it's probably the application layer where you get most of the spikiness and volatility of companies arriving, companies disappearing as their applications don't work as the way they intended. And then that services layer at the top is training and all the other things, consultancy, things you would wrap around it. But when you look at that model, you sort of get a sense that actually AI is probably in on a set of really stable foundations, which is a good thing for people like us going, well, how do I take the step? So think about that. What does it mean for a company like us? So we are a B2B SaaS business. We're non-AI native. It's not in our DNA, but we are thinking about it. So to give you a little bit of context about our business, we are a bereavement technology company. So we build software to make death administration easier for people, right? Probate, estate administration, all that kind of stuff. And on the surface, that feels like quite fertile ground for AI. It's data rich. There's lots of data involved in that process. There are lots of standardized things that you need to get done, lots of outputs that need to get generated every time. And there is a shed load of really dull manual administrative activity that you should be able to engineer out of that model. So on the surface, feels quite exciting. Then you think about our customer base, right? We have two key customer groups. We sell, one half of our software is sold to legal services firms to do estate administration on. The other half is sold to financial services firms to help them deliver a better bereavement experience. Two more risk-averse, dyed-in-the-wool sets of clients you could possibly find in heavily regulated industries. We are not a regulated firm, but we operate in really heavily regulated industries. So does it feel right that we should be driving new AI-driven technology into that space? To be decided. But we do see opportunity. So if I think about our kind of sphere, I could list all sorts of things, but three examples just to help you get your head around it. So one, better ways of communicating with the next of kin, right? So there's lots of people involved. It's a bit messy, but actually you could use conversational AI, all sorts of interesting stuff to make that data exchange and conversation a little bit easier. So that's one side of the model you could look at. You could use AI to generate a lot of the requests for information. So if you know all the details about a case, there's a house, there's a bank account, there's a pension, there's this. Well, actually, AI could generate a lot of that information request kind of flow for you in that process without you having to go and figure it out yourself. Also interesting. And then the third element might be about the standardization of outputs, right? So you have to generate a set of things in this process, but they're bespoke to the case that you're kind of managing the way through. So there are clear spaces in our world where I think actually AI could be really interesting for us, but you need to think about these things. And this is probably the machination that we go through most, is trying to decide how we feel about these four areas. So risk, fairly obviously given who we're dealing with, there is regulatory risk. We know that there's a whole bunch of bigwigs meeting in Seoul this week to talk about how do we regulate AI. We operate in a regulated industry, so regulatory risk for us is a really big concern. Legal risk, so how does AI affect the contracts you have with your customers, the way that you handle all their data, all the other things that you've committed to? There's operational risk. Do you know who in your company is using this technology? Do you know how they're using it? Do you have the policies, procedures, all the safeguards you need to have in place around its use. And then there's the big one for me, which is security risk. We are a data company. We manage data on other people's behalf. Am I introducing more risk than I think is acceptable around the security of all of that data? So that's kind of big thing number one. Number two is cost. There's a obvious ticket price cost to AI, which is we don't have any AI developers. In order for us to do AI well, we would need to go and find AI developers. As I said earlier, they cost a lot of money. My daughter's doing a computer science degree. I hope she'll be an AI developer and then she can look after us in the future. But so the cost of that is true. The cost of distraction, that's the other kind of big one. So if I go over here looking at AI as a new thing, am I taking my eye off the kind of path that we were already on, the set we were already on? So there's that cost. And then there's the IP cost. Are you absolutely sure where the IP sits in your business if you brought in third parties to help you implement AI tools, managing that data in a different way? So there's a whole load of cost implications. Value, is there a clear value exchange between you and your customer when you implement this new technology, right? Is that really clear? Are they getting why you're doing this? Are you getting good value out of it? Is it a mutual exchange? And the same can apply to your staff as you think about asking them to use tools internally inside your business, even Copilot and all these things that are now just ubiquitous on our desktops. Are you clear on what you're doing with those? And then edge is the last thing. So edge is, am I going to get a competitive advantage from implementing AI? Oh, yes, okay, great. Is that competitive advantage sustainable? Can I keep it? Can I manage it? Can I work with it? And actually, importantly, could you get that competitive advantage using technology that you already understand? Is it necessary to implement AI in your business? So that's the sort of stuff that we are actively wrestling with. We have some answers. We don't have all the answers, but all of these things have to work together. And I started with a bit of a history lesson, and if you'll excuse the terrible pun, we're going to go back one step further into history. So is AI public enemy? Probably not. Should we listen to the wise words of Chuck D and Flavor Flav and not believe the hype? The truth is the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, right? So if you can be really clear on that you are not distracted, you're making rational decisions, you're clear in your objectives, you understand the expectations you have out of it, and you can balance cost versus risk and rewards, then the chances are that some version of AI will be useful in your business. It may not be Gen AI. Maybe it's predictive AI. Maybe it's something even less sexy than that will make the difference. But you still have to think about all those things. And it's really easy to launch yourself into adopting this stuff and find you've made a mistake. So I'll leave you with the wise words of Public Enemy, but thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Nick. So again, it just gives an insight into, if you're going on this journey for AI, it's again kind of worth kind of knowing, what's ahead of you. And it is something which recently I was speaking to an animation company, and one of the things that they've got in their contract is that they've got to be able to disclose whether or not they're using any kind of external tools. So again, it's something which I'm now starting to see come through in contracts. So anyway, let's move on to our next speaker is Marika, and Marika is Director of Frauds and Payments from Cleo. Please put your hand together.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me all right from this distance? Lovely. So you made it to the last speaker event before the last final stage and end of the expo. So thank you for bearing with us. And I say thank you, Nick. I think you couldn't have set up my talk in a better way. I promise we didn't collaborate on this ahead of time, but everything has worked out really, really well. So you get a little bit of a juxtaposition in our talks. So I am a Director of Fraud and Payments at Cleo. And Cleo, technically our company name is Cleo AI. So we have clearly bought into the hype. So you'll definitely get some sense of the applications, how we're using AI, how we think that we can improve our business through it, but also take a similar note to Nick around what are some of the pitfalls. And namely, what we'll go through today. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, tell you a little bit about Cleo, but what we'll talk about is the concept of personalization. And use of AI to truly offer people customized products and how that can give you that edge as a business. and the different ways that AI and ML are used to achieve that and where we're falling short, because I don't think we've gotten it right yet. So I'm Marika. I'm a data scientist by training. I've spent the last 10 years working in the finance, payments, fraud space. And my main role, if I were to talk about it, is to optimize stuff. I make numbers go up and to the right. That's what I love doing. I also love slides and I love data. There's not as many graphs as I would like on here, but there's going to be a lot of slides, so bear with me. And I worked for the last 4 years at a company called Cleo. We can claim to be the world's first chat AI-based financial advisor. We have 7 years head start before ChatGPT became a thing. Maybe one of the reasons you probably haven't heard of us is that we operate entirely in the US. We have 7 million customers there. We started off in the UK, really found product market fit there. But it's a great company to work for. We provide a lot of financial products, and it's just where I work in. And what has AI and this personalization helped us achieve? It's two sides, and I'll come back to this, right? You can talk about user engagement and the products that you offer, which have helped us get incredibly high engagement levels. But then my favorite thing, a graph, this is what I am most proud of. In the last 3 years, we have more than quadrupled our contribution margin because we're also using AI to personalize our business operations and really, truly get some value out of thinking about getting to nitty gritty of truly understanding our customers. So what is personalization? Like, what am I really talking about? I'm talking about the use of data to tailor products and services. And it's a concept that is really, really straightforward. And I'm not going to go through this list, but we're not doing it right. So if you think back to the days where most of your banks had brick and mortar places, right? You had maybe a personal banker that your family has always gone to. They knew you through and through. They knew about your child going to school or you wanting to buy a new house. So they offered you custom products and they were really, really able to help you. Well, now a lot of the stuff has gone online. And now we're trying to say that, hey, we're offering you personalized services through AI, but we're not doing it right. Essentially, what we end up doing is creating these buckets, right? And we put people into these buckets. And through the use of machine learning, maybe if you have loads and loads of buckets in terms of like customer risk or what we think they might want next. But as long as we're putting people into buckets, we're not truly personalizing our services. We're just trying to say that, hey, you kind of look like this customer segment, so therefore this is the thing we will offer you. And that's not true personalization. I think that's still where we're falling short. And I'll go through a couple of examples of what it's not and what it could be. So I like the idea of personas, and my ChatGPT generated slightly creepy images of people. So let's talk about an example of Alice. Alice sells custom baby crochet projects, right? She goes on Marketplace. She has income streams that come from Etsy or just through friends. They're not the traditional sources that you might have from full-time employment. So let's say she wants to get a personal loan. Traditionally, what happens today is that she goes and has to fill out an application that has a set amount of questions that she has to kind of fit her personal finances into that story. Then she's assigned some sort of risk decile and then given a loan amount or rejected altogether. That's not personalization, right? One opportunity of personalization, what it could be is, let's say that she had an incentive to connect her bank account through open banking, and we truly understand her personal spending habits, availability of funds, to give her a nuanced lending decision based on her personal health profile. That's more personalization. Or take another example. Robert can't make it through to his next paycheck, keeps running out of money, so he wants a budgeting tool. Most of the apps out there, they will pretty much just give you a category-based transactional spending thing, show you a couple of bar charts. You can recreate it in Excel, essentially, right? It'll just say that, hey, you're spending 10% on groceries. The average person spends 8%. You should cut 2%. That's not personalization, because again, you're giving the exact same templates to people. Yes, you're using their own financial data to deliver those insights, but it's not truly getting to the core of what this person needs. So personalization would be more like giving true guided coaching and advice based on his individual spending habits. You can also apply this to payments, right? Let's say you have a subscription service. You put some services behind a subscription tier. And the way that you deal with it is that, okay, well, you signed up on the 10th, so we'll try to take a payment from you on the next 10th. And if that fails, maybe we'll try twice more, and that's it. Whereas personalization would be working with their financial data to understand when are they getting paid? When will they have the money to pay for the subscription, and helping serve them through that way. Final example, KYC, right? And I'll go through this in a lot more, and this kind of goes back to Nick's point as well. Often what we do is be like, okay, well, I need to meet these regulatory requirements. I need to have a risk model. So let's say I'll pay a third-party vendor for a model that gives me a risk score and just kind of plug and play. But that doesn't take into account who your customers are, what other behavior they've shown on your app. It's not personalized. You just throw a model at it. Personalization can apply everywhere. Literally every single part of your business has some sort of application where you can get better about personalizing your products. You don't have to do it everywhere, but just gonna put that out there. So I'm gonna get into the buzzwords that we're here for. Big data, AI, ML, LLM, we'll cover all of it. I always get questions about this, and people yell at me, and there's loads of talk about it, right? Like, what's machine learning, what's AI? I'm not gonna go through the definition, but the key takeaways, I'll use them interchangeably, but in reality, all ML is AI, not all AI is ML. And I'll go through these key recommendations. I'll come back to these ones, but the three things I would like you to take away from the rest of this talk is that one size does not fit all. Not all models are fit for purpose. You have to get personal with it. If you're thinking about applying ML in your business, you need to centralize your machine learning capabilities and think about it as you would any sort of other business area. And finally, you need to foster a culture of innovation and iteration, because AI keeps evolving and you need to evolve with it. I like journeys. So this is kind of the typical path that I've seen companies take when it comes to developing models. Not everybody follows this, but this is one of the more common ones. So first thing is that you identify a need that, hey, I'm going to hire some data scientists or data analysts or data engineers. They're gonna collect all my data together. And then some of my businesses will be like, hey, I have a need for a model. Then we'll either train the model or buy the model, apply the model to that business area. And then finally, most importantly, iterate. Like, you'll keep iterating on that and keep training that model. And we've seen a journey on where companies have gotten to this. So I'm going to take you to 2014. I was a consultant working with some of the largest banks in the US. And back in the day, we had the big hype words of Hadoop platforms, or big data was the big thing then, right? Everybody was investing money into creating these massive data lakes and collecting all of their data together. And then literally we're just sitting around poking that data lake being like, so do something. Like, you said that if I brought all of this data together, I'll get some value out of it. Where we got stuck in 2014 is that we didn't know where the true business areas were, where machine learning, where data science could truly extract the value out of the data that we had. 2024, we have evolved a bit, right? We actually now have models, and you can go around and there's so many businesses sit around trying to like sell you these great models and great ideas and applications. And then we buy them, and then we're stuck again, poking at it with a stick, being like, well, you sold me this model, like, what value am I gonna get of it? Where we're now is that we're having some trouble extracting true value out of AI, right? We bought into the hype. We don't really know what to do with it. We apply it, we can put it into certain places, but we're not really getting the maximum output out of it, and we're not really getting it through personalization. So what can we do about it? So we'll go back to these recommendations. One size does not fit all. You cannot just plug into a model and expect it to do something. And if anybody here is from DPD, I am really, really sorry about this next example, but I find this to be the best one out there. When ChatGPT became a thing, everyone's like, we can use it in our customer chats and just implement it, right? And then you had this case that went viral where somebody got the DPD chatbot to start writing haikus about how useless DPD is, because he kind of plugged in and didn't really think about the potential use cases, right? Like, where could it go wrong? How can we test it out? Let's test the limits. And in general, the key things that I keep talking about at work as well, whenever somebody's like, oh, there's this company, they're providing a model, let's just kind of like buy it and see what happens, is that often companies will come to you and say, hey, By my model, because it's trained on so many customers, right? Your customer segment might be here, but we've trained it on all of these other use cases. So we have knowledge that you do not. And that's our key selling point. But it could also be the biggest disadvantage that you have. So I'll take Cleo, for example. If you think about users and the financial health journey that they're on, they can be anywhere from financially struggling and really starting out, or they can be very financially comfortable. Most risk models are trained on the entire customer base. But at Cleo, we only serve the financially underserved mostly. So our customers are here. So if I apply a risk model trained on this to this, guess what? It rejects all of our customers. So you need to think about how you personalize it to your business needs. It's not just apply it and it will work. The second part is you need to centralize your machine learning capabilities. And I'll go back to another Cleo example on this. We use AI, machine learning in pretty much every single part of our business. And that has risks. And so I'll focus on one specific business case that we have, income detection. So one of the things at Cleo that we do is that we have a transaction that comes through from open banking, and we have to understand whether that transaction is income or not. So this is my expense report that I was delayed for a whole year that I submitted and that finally came through. So our model tries to figure out, is this income? If it's income, is it recurring income? Who's the employer? Is it government benefits? Is it a gig worker? Is it a full-time employment? How much does this person then make in a year? How often are they paid? When is their next payday? And the most traditional application that we have of this is in our budgeting tool, right? Because we want to know exactly who's getting paid when, what part is income. But soon realized that we had loads of other use cases for it. So for example, our payments team was trying to figure out when's the right time to take a payment? Well, when you just get paid. So when's their income coming in? Or our risk decisioning and our lending teams were trying to figure out, well, how much are people getting paid? Should we be giving them a loan of X amount? And so you had the same team solving this exact same problem at the same time. But for nobody, it wasn't their primary thing, right? It was a step to get to something else. So without a proper machine learning strategy and a centralized function to look after it, you're going to end up reinventing the wheel over and over and over again, where you could be solving that problem once and applying it throughout your organization. And finally, you need to foster a culture of innovation and iteration. One of the biggest mistakes I see is that we go in, we deploy a model, and then that's it. We leave it, and we kind of expect it to work. But you need to remember that models degrade over time. And there's constantly new applications coming in that you can improve the output of what you're trying to get out of that model. And finally, just like with that example, the same model can be used in so many surprising ways throughout your business. So the value you can extract out of it is incredible. And that's it. Promise there'll be a lot of slides. Thank you so much.
Fantastic, Marika. That's great. It's great just to kind of get again, just to kind of hear about just kind of the application of AI and ML. So we're opening up to any questions. If anybody's got any questions, please do put up your hands. I know the last sessions were being a bit quiet, so I'll kind of kick off the kind of the panel session and ask Marika and Nick, is it the case that we're now having to be a bit more sophisticated in the application of AI? I mean, I guess when we're talking about risk, I mean, obviously people are already experimenting using various tools out there, but when it comes to your business and business critical services, is it the case that we need to be developing it within our own teams, or should we be very cautious about using other platforms that are out there?
It's a good question. Based on what I said, I would be typically a bit cautious about it, but
Yep.
I think I'm very conscious that for us to keep growing as a business and a team, we're going to have to think about this stuff carefully and probably have to create some expertise in-house.
Yeah.
I think if you're talking critical stuff, as a rule of thumb, I'd say it's a bad idea to have all your critical stuff sitting outside of your house.
Yep.
It should be stuff that you're a bit more conversant on and capable with. So that's forms part of our kind of investment strategy, growth strategy. Think about how do you augment your existing team with a bit more of that skill set and help your own team grow as well by getting them exposed to it and learning it and understanding it.
So I guess that comes back to that kind of risk strategy when you're again, developing any system, probably more so nowadays if to be aware and thinking about what models you're using, where they come from, who's got access to that. And I guess that's the bit right now that we're kind of still in that kind of early kind of stage. Marika, from your own, from Cleo's perspective, what are you finding as well within your business? Are you finding that you're consolidating the team of experts into a kind of core group?
Yeah, we've been through the stages of having data scientists that are embedded in every single team. And that's where we ended up in a case, right, where we're just kind of resolving the same problem over and over and over again. And so centralizing those experts that you do have in your company, it really, really helps. It gets you an overview of exactly what capabilities you have and what you should develop. But to that point too, right, unless you have a proper business case, it doesn't just make sense to throw models or data scientists out there, right? You need to have that strategy first.
And I guess within that is I think it was a great example there. You're asking questions and doing a lot of testing. I guess the thing here is now that the testing, I would say, so the process has to be very, very robust in order to be able to. So I guess that also comes back to really knowing your own product, to being able to kind of keep. So in some ways, the testing data is probably more valuable to make sure that that you can actually, what you put in is what you're getting out.
Oh, I agree with that wholeheartedly, right? Unless you stress test something, I think that's one of the more dangerous things you can do is just deploy it and hope that it works because somebody sold it to you and said it would work.
So I guess that kind of goes back to that data strategy. If you don't have that data strategy in place right now, don't. The recommendation is be very cautious about going down that path or using ML before you get your your data processes in place. Would that be the case?
Yeah, I think one of the first things we did when we set the business up was think about our data strategy. We knew we would evolve into a data business over time. You start day one with no data,
Yep.
but as you accumulate that data and or you have a view on how you're going to manage it, it gives you that foundation. Then you can start to think about the tools that might go on top of it. I would love us theoretically at some point to be capable of building a small language model around bereavement and everything that goes with that, because it is a rich kind of area.
Yep.
But there's a lot more you'd have to put through it to get to the sort of scale that would be beneficial.
So it sounds as if there's a trend now going towards actually investing in your own models is the bit that is becoming the selling point for so rather than going, well, we're just going to use a third party, the value of working with us is we've got our own closed model and we're trained it because we then got we've taken that, we can validate and assure the information that's kind of going through. Would that be something you're saying, Marika?
I would say it's almost a hybrid strategy.
Okay.
What you can do is both, right? You can have your own model that takes inputs from external models, because I think there is a value to the companies that provide models, because yes, they have broader access to way more customers that you might ever have. And that's incredibly valuable information. But if you take the output of those models and that just becomes input to your own in-house model, I think I've seen a lot of businesses go down that path.
That's a great. So final last question.
There was a question.
There's a question there?
I think originally, but
right.
go on to
Okay.
two questions.
Yeah, two questions. Great. Excellent. Three.
Can you guys hear me?
Four.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nick, it's a question for you. I wanted to ask about emotional intelligence of AI. So obviously your end users will be dealing with a bereavement, which is a sensitive subject. And we talked earlier about health tech using chatbots for mental health and whatnot.
Yeah.
Do you think AI will have enough emotional intelligence to deal with such sensitive subjects, or do you think there'll always be a need for a personal touch or a personal involvement?
When I look at what we do and the business that we're involved in, I always think there's a time and place for human involvement because it is a sensitive subject. That said, if you're going through the administration of an estate, by the third time you're trying to tell the same story over and again, you've kind of had enough, right? You just want You want the transaction to happen. You want it to be efficient. And I think there's ways to do that, but you can't make it the only route. And that's what I think sometimes people get wrong is they take this new piece of technology, they apply it, that becomes the route. And it's so hard for you to fall out and try and find someone to speak to, right? We've all been through that, right? Awful IVRs on telephony systems where you just get in this death cycle of, excuse the pun, of conversation you can't get out of. So if you've got something like AI that can start you in a good way, but there's a transition point out to speak to someone when you need to do it, not when a company decides it's appropriate or now's the right time, I'll let you speak to someone now. When you need to do it, you can. I think that's the right way to think about it.
Okay, got another question?
My question is for Marika. If I understand right, what Cleo does is give financial advice that's personalized. I was wondering, with lots of conflicting views on kind of philosophies for financial advice, like optimize for wealth versus optimize for paying off all your debt first, how do you build that into a model? Do you choose one or give options, etc.?
The approach we've taken is we've partnered with some financial advisors that kind of give a breadth of it, depending on what the person's personal goals are, right? So first thing we always do is ask user, do you already have goals? Because the last thing you want to do is somebody comes in and says, I want to get into investing, and we're like, I don't think you're ready yet, right? I think the second part is that you do need a very widely publicized and clear route. I don't know if you've ever been to the personal finance subreddit, right? They have a really, really nice flow chart. And that's kind of what we've also talked about, right? It's something that's very, very widely recognized that people can follow, but we help make it personalized to you.
Okay, another question there. We've got another two here.
Hi, my question is related to the AI efficiency. So the more we help the tools to get better, the more advanced they get, the least errors they generate. But at some point, they can replace some of the employees that are working in this specific fields. For example, call centers, for example, trading, and other more operational areas. So how successful companies in your experience with the market and etc. So how successful companies are doing in making sure that the technological advancement happens, but at the same time, they make sure that these other implications, they are noticed and they're paying attention on this.
I can take a stab on like an example that we have, and call centers is a really big one. So for example, Cleo, we have automated 80% of our incoming inquiries into our customer service. And so you'd think that, okay, well, maybe we are now cutting down 80% of our costs and we don't need the people anymore. We've actually grown our headcount in that space because that means you can use and dedicate that time to truly more valuable requests, spending more time with the customers, the more difficult problems that before had to be solved in 5 minutes. Now you have way more time, you have 20 minutes to solve them, right? And that improves the customer experience. So we've seen a lot of value in that. And I think we also kind of see the benefits to the people who work in this space as well, because it's a much more rewarding job for them because they're not just answering really, really silly questions. So I think there's a give and take. Like, I don't really buy into the idea that AI is going to replace us all. Like, you can see it, how important prompt engineering is coming in. It's not something you just deploy and it fixes everything. You need so much human interaction, but how that interaction comes in changes.
Yeah, I haven't worked in big corporate for a while now, so I left banking 6 years ago, thankfully, and moved on to something else. But from my experiences, whatever technology you use, whether it's AI or something else, right, in those environments, all you really do is free up capacity, because most big corporates, something is on fire somewhere all the time, and that capacity gets redeployed to fix the next problem. It rarely actually achieves the big, well, we're going to take 40% of our workforce out. It's just because the next thing comes along that you need to solve. And to Marika's point, the utopia is you point all that resource, all that capacity at much more value add things. It just makes sense. And if you're in one of those roles that starts to be displaced, there's a bit of, companies need to be mindful of that and help you move on to the next thing. But not immediately. I don't see it being a massive game changer in terms of employment. It just, as usual, things get moved around, shuffled around.
Okay, we've got, we'll take one here and final one over there.
I just wanted to get your opinion on whether you think there's a need for real-time data to be feeding these models. Because it seems as if all data strategies are day-1, so it's like they're not real-time, whereas there's a lot of solutions out there that do business process automation. I just wondered how you think that would accelerate things or make it more beneficial or more benefits to it.
Do you have a view?
I have a biased view. Everything in Cleo we go for is real time. We don't do day-long lagging models. That's what we aim for. But that's kind of more of a personal preference. So from my view, yes, 100%. But I know that's not the stance that everybody takes.
Yeah, I think it's all contextual, right? Depends what you need it for. Just purely from our perspective, nothing really needs to be real time. You know, it's actually point in time is the most important thing, not real time. But if you're looking at real time credit risk decisioning for people, you want as close to the current state of things as you possibly can get. So I think real time is good if it's balanced with accuracy and it's verified and all that kind of. And I'm not sure that everything needs to be real time, but I know that you could write a list of cases where it would be a good thing if it's for the right outcome.
Excellent question. And finally,
Hi, thank you. My question was for Marika. So you're talking about centralizing these teams, AI teams, and not kind of working in data silos. How does that work in a financial organization that has to ring fence some of their data? So for example, if I work in a bank that works in multiple jurisdictions, people in one jurisdiction can't access data from another, or even actually within the same jurisdiction, you have some teams, like for example, financial crime, data will only be accessed by the people who work in that specific domain. So how do you navigate that when you're looking at building models?
I think it's a very fair point, and also the limitations of a 15-minute presentation. Yeah, there's loads of edge cases where that doesn't really work. So I would kind of maybe rephrase that saying, like, where you can access data, you should, because we're still seeing silos being created in areas where data sharing is allowed. But you're absolutely right. Like, there's definitely going to be legislation around it. There's areas where you just cannot pass that on. There are some techniques you can use, for example, my time at Meta, right, that you can kind of create models. And sometimes there is some leeway where that same model output can be used across the organization as long as the base data that feeds that model is not accessed by itself. But a lot of these kind of like case-by-case scenarios.
another excellent question. So I just want to say thanks very much to Nick and Marika. I think we could have actually carried on for another hour at this, and I think I'll suggest to Ray to reconvene this session at another Digit kind of conference. But I think it's great, that we've got Nick and Marika here with their expertise. Please, could you put your hands together for a great session? Thank you.